it's Thursday and today you guys voted and so we are going to be making a lemur. Now I am not to be blamed for how many color changes there are in this pattern. You guys picked it, alright? You asked for stripes, I'm gonna give you stripes. Okay, so let's talk about tools and materials. So to make your lemur today, you're going to need 8 ply 100% acrylic yarn in 3 colors. So those colors are black, white, and gray, but as per usual, I'll be using a dark gray instead of a black on screen, just because it shows better on camera. Now, because I'm substituting in my black, I've also got a little bit of black here to stitch on his nose. You're also going to need a pair of 9mm safety eyes, and I've managed to find this perfect pair that have the yellow iris around the black pupil. Just dug those out of the back of my stash. In terms of tools, you're going to need a 3.5mm hook, scissors, pins and needles, and some stuffing. But that's it. Now you should buckle in, guys, because this is not an easy project. A written version of today's pattern will be made available to my patrons and will be listed in my Etsy, and I will leave links to both in the description down below for anybody who is interested. All right, that's enough monkeying around. So here is our lemur that we are making today. He is made up of a lot of different pieces. Now, this particular pattern is a primate example of lots of color changes, so be prepared for that before we go into it. So the way we assemble him is he has an entirely different face and head piece that attaches onto his body nugget here at the back. So we're going to start by making his little eye patches. To do that, we're going to start by grabbing our black, and we're going to create a magic ring. So this magic ring is a little bit unusual, so we're going to start by creating the little knot that goes in the middle. We're then going to put 4 single crochet into the magic ring, which should look like that. And then we are going to slip stitch once into the magic ring, creating a little point there, and pull it shut, but not too tightly. Now I've pulled mine a little bit tightly there just so I can show you how to fix it if you do. You grab your hook and you just work it into the knot to make sure that you've got that little tiny hole back. And with that done, I'm going to finish off. So you'll see that the piece is kind of this little swoosh. So pop that down and we're going to make another one. And because it's only a quick piece, we can do that together. So we start with a magic ring, then 4 single crochet, then a slip stitch. Pull your magic ring closed, but not too tightly. So that time I left enough room in there, and finish off. So there is our second little swoosh. So you can actually grab your eyes and just insert them through that magic ring now. And you'll note that the little swooshes have a narrow end where we finished off and a wider end where we started. The wider end is kind of on top of the eye and the little pointy end is on the bottom of the eye. There is one. I'm not snapping my backs on. I'm just popping these through the openings. So flip one of them over. So there are his somewhat creepy little eyes at this point. But that will improve from here. So next up what we need to make are his 2 little ears. Now we do use color changes to make the little gray rectangle. Now you can just ignore those color changes and use a small piece of felt instead or some paint afterwards. I guess that's the same for the eye pieces, but I'm going to be showing you how to stitch those markings in. Look at how crispy those color changes are. Look at those edges. Whoa. So this time I'm going to start with some white, but I'm going to have my black on hand ready for when the time comes. And we're going to start with a magic ring of 6. So you may notice that I've got some black marks on the white yarn that I'm using. That's just because I've recycled this yarn from another project. And you can pull the magic ring all the way shut this time. So there is the tip of our ear. Then in row 2, we're going to start with a single crochet and then an increase. And we're going to change to our black in the second stitch of that increase. So as this is the first color change of this pattern, I will stop and show you how we do that. So as per usual, you always want to change colors in the stitch before you need the new color to be active. So for us, that's the second stitch of this increase. So we've done 1. Then I'm going to insert my hook into the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. So I've got 2 loops of my old color on my hook, hold that color out of the way, and grab a strand of our new color. So I'm going to put that new color on the inside and pinch it at the base of the stitch, yarn over with it and pull through both of those loops, completing my white stitch. So what you can see there is we have a completed stitch in our old color, but our new color is on our hook, ready to go. So this color is not staying on our hook for very long, however, because we're doing 1 stitch in our black and then we need to be using our white again. So our next stitch is going to be a color change as well. Insert your hook, yarn over, hold it out of the way. I'm just going to pull the white forward from where it's still attached, yarn over and finish off my black stitch. We're then going to complete the row in our white by working an increase, a single crochet, and an increase. So that should leave you with 9 stitches in your round. Then we're going to start round 3 with an increase, 2 single crochet, but changing back to our black in the second one. So you can see there that's still attached from the previous row. I'm just going to grab it, complete the stitch. Then we're going to work 1 black stitch and then a second black stitch, changing back to our white. Then we finish the row with 4 single crochet. So that brings us to our final row, and we start that by working a single crochet, then an increase, then 2 single crochet, changing to our black in the second one. We're going to work 3 black stitches across, changing back to our white in the third one. So then in our white, we'll work 2 single crochet, and then an increase to finish the row, and finish off. So be careful, he can now hear us. So you will need to make 2 of those, 1 for either side of his head. Pop those to one side. Okay, so next up we're going to be creating this disc of a face piece, starting at the tip of his nose. So in our black, we're going to start with a magic ring of 6. So that's the tip of his nose. We're then going to work 6 single crochet around. Then 3 repeats of an increase and then a single crochet to get us up to 9. Now in the last stitch of that row, we were supposed to change to our white, so I'm just going to frog it and work our color change. Same way as we were doing for the ears. So in our white, we're going to start by working 2 increases. And then we're going to work 3 single crochet into the same stitch. And then another increase, 3 single crochet along the bottom of his head, another increase, and then 3 single crochet into the next stitch. Now that should bring your row up to 17 stitches, and you should stop and count. But in general for this project, I do recommend counting at the end of each row. So at this point, you can trim off your black. So we're then just going to work 2 more rows in our white to build up the rest of the face. And finish off. Now make sure that you're keeping track of all of these little pieces. We don't need any emergencies. So those are all the pieces we currently have for the face. So now we're going to create one final piece that's going to attach all of these pieces in together. So off to one side with you. We're finally going to be grabbing our grey, which is your main lemur body colour. We're going to start again with a magic ring of 6. Now lemurs have a squarish head, so over the next 2 rows, we're going to be building this out into a flat rectangle. And if you look carefully at the pattern, you'll be able to see that we're doing that by loading our increases into 4 key points around the circle. So there we are, now we have our little rectangle. We're going to grab our ears and we're going to attach them in the next row. So grabbing our first ear and our stitch marker, what you want to do is find the finishing off point and count 2 stitches after that finishing off point and mark that stitch there. So you'll see that there are 3 white stitches between the black and your marked stitch. And for the second ear, we're going to identify that finishing off point and count 4 stitches afterwards so that there is 1 white stitch between the black and the marked stitch. So now we grab our little head rectangle again and work 1 single crochet just to get around to where we want the first ear to be attached. Then grab our first ear. What we're going to do is line that marked stitch up with the next available stitch of the head. You can take the marker out at this point. Then insert your hook from the inside of the ear to the outside through 1 stitch and then through the next stitch of the head as well. Then single crochet through both layers. So that's our first stitch. We're going to work 5 of these in total. So each through 1 stitch of the ear and 1 stitch of the head. The third stitch might be a little bit tricky just because we've got that finishing off point in the way, but it's still the same process of just navigate to the next stitch, and single crochet through both layers. So there is our first ear attached. So now we're going to go back to working into just the head by putting 3 single crochet into the same stitch. Then 3 single crochet across, 3 single crochet into the next stitch. And now we're going to attach our second ear. So grabbing our second ear, line that marked stitch up with our next active stitch of the head. Once again, we're going to work 5 single crochet through 1 layer of the ear and 1 layer of the head. Then going back to working into the head, we have 2 single crochet to finish the round. Both of our ears are now attached. So now we have 1 more row to work, and then we're going to be attaching the face. So we start that row with a single crochet into just the head, and then we're going to work around the outside of the ear. We start that by identifying the first white stitch not worked into, which is this one here, and we're going to increase, and then work 6 single crochet around the edge. That should use up all of the remaining stitches of the ear. Then making sure to skip the 5 stitches that we used to attach the ear, we're going to go back to working just in the head, and we're going to work 9 single crochet across the face. Like so. Then going back to working into the ear, I'll identify the first stitch not worked into, and we're going to work 6 single crochet around the edge. And then in the last available stitch of that ear, we're going to put another increase. Then 2 single crochet into just the head to finish off the round. So your new available round should have 28 stitches in it. So this is the last row of this little headpiece now, and it starts with a single crochet, then 8 single crochet around the outside of that ear, which brings us to where we want to attach the face. So if you grab the face piece that we made, once again grabbing one of our little stitch markers, find your finishing off point and count 7 stitches around. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So there is our 7th stitch, and that is going to be the stitch that we start in. So once again lining the right side of your face, so that's the side with the nose, against the top of the head, so that the next active stitch of the head lines up with our marked stitch. We are going to work 9 single crochet along through 1 layer of the face and 1 layer of the head. Like so. Then swapping back to working just through our main headpiece, we're going to work 8 single crochet around the outside of the ear, and then 2 single crochet to finish our round. And finish off. So we're just going to pop that so that it sticks outwards instead of inwards. And we're going to take a moment and insert our eyes. So counting back from the tip of the nose, the eyes are going to go into round 4. So the little grey ring that we've made should sit on the outer edge of the eye. As mentioned before, we should have the wider end at the top and the narrower end with all the little finish offs at the bottom. So there's 1, and 1, 2, 3, and 4. Insert the eye and then tug that little grey strip around to sit correctly. So with those where I want them now, I am going to snap the backs on. Now, if your eyes have longer spokes than mine, you might want to wait and attach them through the layer of the body as well. But because mine is so small, I found that I have to snap them on at this point. Work this on. Oh, that was a good pop sound. And now we can just take a moment and move these strands to the inside of the work just by poking our hook through a near available opening, popping them through. Okay, so now that we've made his face, you might say that he's a lemur. Anyway, pop that to one side and I promise the next bits get easier. Or you could just go around and like attach lemur heads to things. I made a pygmy lemur. That's enough nightmare fuel for one video. Let's pop that to one side. All right, so with that bit done, we are going to make his body nugget. So his body nugget actually starts at the top of his head as well and works all the way down to this little area hidden by the base of his tail. He's a lemur. So we do start in all grey and you should work up that piece now. Now we do have a number of colour changes in here to work up the white of his belly, and those are all as indicated. Just remember to always do your colour changes in the stitch before you need that new colour to be active. and finish off. So you'll see we still have a tiny opening with 6 stitches around in our base. We're just going to take the remaining tail of our yarn and pull it through the front loops of those 6 remaining stitches. And pull it tight to close. Then tuck that end down inside. Give it a pat to flatten it out. So there is our body nugget. There we are at the end of the body, and I just wanted to really let you focus on how those color changes are sitting. You see how zigzaggy they are down that end, how weird of a shape this is. They're a little bit straighter down this other side, but still kind of zigzaggy. All of those edges are going to be covered by legs and a face piece and all that other thing, all those other pieces. And he's a weird lumpy shape because he'll be sitting up like this, and that allows his head to loom over correctly with the curve of his back. So your piece should end up looking like this, okay? Just trust the process. So next up is the longest tail I've ever had to tell you on camera. Now we are starting at the tip of the tail, and we're going to be doing some tricky business to get it to curve this way using slip stitches and half double crochets. So we are going to start in our black with a magic ring of 6. And we're then going to work the next 3 rows to get up to 15 single crochet around, all in our black. And then in the last stitch of row 4, we're going to change to our white. So the first row of our white is a pretty basic 15 single crochet around, like so. And then in the next row, we're going to start pulling out some tricks to get it to curve correctly. So I did learn this trick from Skein Spider. You should check out her channel if you haven't already, but it starts with 2 slip stitches, and you're going to want to work them very, very loosely because you will have to work stitches into them in the next round. So that's 2. We're then going to work 3 single crochet, and then we're going to be working 5 half double crochet. So that is a US crochet term, meaning we are yarning over our hook once, inserting it into the stitch, yarning over and pulling up a loop. You'll have 3 loops there on your hook. Yarn over and pull through all 3. And the result is basically just a slightly taller single crochet stitch. So that's our first one. We're going to work 4 more of those across. There we go. We're then going to work 3 more single crochet, and then slip stitch into the remaining 2 stitches of the round. And again, making sure to do those nice and loose so that you can fit your hook through them in the next round. So there we are at the end of row 6. And if you look straight down at it, you can already see it's wider on one side and narrower on the other. And if we stack enough rows like that around, it's going to curve our tail like a little donut. So you can go on at this point and work up the rest of the rows of the tail. Now for this tail, you should stuff it firmly as you go. Over the next 11 rows, we'll be building the first curve of the S-bend. We'll then be working just 15 single crochet around for the middle section before building in the second curve of the S-bend as we get towards the base. So we will be changing color every 3 rows, and you don't need to trim off after each color change or carry your second color with you because our rows will all start and finish at the same point. So you can literally just grab it from where we finished with it last time and pull it up from the inside of the stitches. And finish off. Once again, we are left with a little opening at the base of our tail, and we're going to do the same thing we did for our body to close that off. So there's our tail. I do have to say though, the shape of it makes me wonder if Icus and Crumb are somewhere around here. So you can pop that to one side for now. So yeah, next up we're going to be making his limbs. So what you can see here is we have a cute little arm. It's open at one end and only has 4 little fingers, even though lemurs technically have 4 fingers and a thumb. There's only room for 4 fingers on this one today. So we're going to start with his arms. So we start at the palm of his hand in our black, and we're going to make a magic ring of 6. Like so. So that is the palm of his hand. And the next row, start with a single crochet And then we're going to make the first of his little fingers. And we do that by working a triple crochet in the front loop and then a slip stitch into the back loop of the same stitch. So if you look straight down at your stitches there, you should be able to see one loop on the side closest to you and one loop on the side facing away. The one closest to you is your front loop. So a treble crochet or a triple crochet is when you yarn over your hook twice, you insert your hook into the stitch, in this case just the front loop, yarn over and pull up a loop. So you should have 4 loops in total on your hook. Yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops, yarn over and pull through the next 2 loops, and then yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops. So that is what your triple crochet currently looks like. Fold that forward and slip stitch into the back loop of the same stitch. So there is one bobbly little toe, and we're going to repeat that 3 more times. Like so. So you can see that we've got 4 bobbly little toes there now. Now we're just going to work a final single crochet to finish the row, changing to our grey. Like so. So now we've got our 4 bobbly little toes. So for row 3, we're working 6 single crochet around, and you need to be careful about where you place those because they only go into the single crochets and triple crochets from the previous round, not into the slip stitches. So we start by single crocheting into the first single crochet, nice and easy. You then find the triple crochet, put a single crochet in there. You can see the little slip stitch in between, but the next stitch we're going to work into is the triple crochet again. That's 2. Skip the slip stitch, single crochet into the triple crochet. Skip the slip stitch and single crochet into the last triple crochet. You should have just 1 pair of loops to go. And we single crochet into those as well. So at the end of this row, stop and count, make sure that you've got 6 stitches in your round. And at this point, you can trim off your black. And all those little ends can be just stuffed down inside the hand. So with the hand out of the way, you can now go ahead and work up the rest of the arm. And finish off. Now for these arms, we are going to stuff them up to about the halfway point, but then leave the rest of them empty so that they sit flat against the body when they're attached. So I've stuffed mine up to there. So with that, I feel like I can finally tell you guys my favorite ever joke. So why do generals always send their armies into battle? Because if they sent their leggies, they'd always end in defeat. So next up, we're going to be making his kicky little legs so that he isn't just a lemur, he is Bruce Lemur. So we're going to start with the haunch, which actually starts at this like little knee point and works its way diagonally back towards this butt point. And we're just going to very lightly stuff these. Finish off and once again close off the opening at the end of the leg. So there is our first finished haunch, and you are of course going to need 2 of those. Pop those to one side. So then the final piece we have to make are his feet. Grab your black, and we're going to start with a magic ring of 6. So that's the sole of his foot. We're then going to be adding 3 little toes in the next row. So we start with a single crochet to get around to where we want the first toe to be. And then in the next 3 stitches, we're going to be doing 3 of those toe stitches that we used as fingers before. So that's a triple crochet in the front loop and then a slip stitch into the back loop. So there is our first one, and we're going to do 2 more of those. Now this is not the correct number of toes for a lemur, and I am sorry about that. It's just a space thing. So then we have 2 more stitches in our round. So we're going to put a single crochet into the first one, and then 3 single crochet all into the same stitch. In the last stitch, we're going to change to our grey. So we're going to complete the rest of the foot in our grey. So row 3 is 8 single crochet around. Now, when we're single crocheting, we're working only into the single crochets and triple crochets from the previous row, not into the slip stitches. So keep a careful eye out for that as you crochet your way around. Like so. At this point, I'm going to trim my black off. And then you can go ahead and work rows 4, 5, and 6 to finish off our foot. And you don't need to stuff this piece. Once again, use the remaining piece of yarn to close off the little gap at the back. So there is his little flipper, and you will need to make 2 of those as well. So you'll be able to tell the top from the bottom, just because the bottom has that magic ring and the top just has the toes. Okay, so now we have all of our lemur pieces made. So the time has come to assemble, and we're going to start by stitching a couple of extra details onto the head. So everything else can go to one side. So I have a little bit of black on my needle, and I'm just going to stitch over the top of the top row of the magic ring to add a little black nose. Now I would still use black yarn for this if you've used black instead of dark grey like I have. You won't get as much contrast, but you'll still get the shape and the idea that there is a nose there. I know that you can get clip-on noses as well. You could use those for this too. So there we go. Now we have him smelling a bit better. So what you can see here is the difference your nose positioning will make to the shape of your snout. If you get it right on the very tippy tip, you'll end up with a pointy snout like this fellow has. Or if you make it a little bit wider on top, you'll end up with a shorter, slightly stubbier snout. Both of which are very lemury. And I don't want to see you making fun of the short-nosed lemur, okay? Lemur alone. And I've rethreaded my needle with some of my dark grey, which I've been using as my black. And we're going to use that to stitch on a couple of little eyelids. Just give him that very lemur demeanor. Now you can stitch your eye patches on at the same time if you like. The safety eyes will hold them in place though without any additional sewing. So I've gone for a very neutral expression there. You can go for a more closed eyelid so that he looks super unimpressed, or so that he looks a little bit sleepy, but that's just what I'm going to go with today. All right, so next up, grab your body nugget and we're going to attach our head. So you'll see we've got the top of where our white starts, and you're going to line the bottom of this little face piece up just over the top of that first row of white, and we're going to pin it in place. Then going to sort of stretch the ears out to either side and wrap the back of the head around the top of the piece. Pin that in place along the back. And you'll notice we've got these little like gaps or openings on the side. We're just going to, first of all, pin down the sides of the face. Then I'm going to sort of pinch the triangle of the ear and pin that down too. Now you're going to want to take your time with this step. It's the head. It's the most important piece. It's the thing that people are going to look at straight away. So if you think it looks crooked or wonky, stop, take it off, try it again. So that is how mine currently looks. So we're going to use some of our main body color and we're going to sew these 2 pieces together now. So welcome to the sewing tutorial part of this project. So what we have here is a flat piece that we're sewing to a closed piece. And so there is a specific way that I would want to sew this on so that it looks as seamless as possible. So I'm going to start where the grey meets the cheek. And I'm just going to thread my needle in from sort of somewhere else in the body and then out through an opening between the grey stitches close to where that edge is. And so leave just the little end of it poking out for now. We will tuck that away later, but that's just so you know you're not pulling it the whole way through. I'm then going to insert my needle up and through the front loop only of that face piece. If you can see that there. We've picked it up on our yarn. And then I'm going to insert my needle back through that same gap in the grey stitches and then up through the next gap along. So I'm not poking my needle through the stitch itself, I'm working it in between the gaps. And what you can see there is it grabs that front loop and pulls it down tight to the body. And I'm going to do that for every stitch around that face piece. So up through the front loop, then inserting our needle back through the gap in the body and then out through the next gap along. You'll see there you're not getting that ridge, and instead you're getting a fairly nice seamless join between the two pieces. So you should go ahead now and work all the way around to the other side of your grey. So there I am on the other side. Now because this is white on white, I want to use white yarn to sew that bit on. So what I'm going to do is thread my needle through the same gap in the stitch that I would use to sew that last stitch on. Then just poke it out through the body somewhere, again, just through the gaps in the stitches. So then you can secure this yarn by just working a tiny little stitch over the top of one of your existing stitches, and then threading it back through the body out to a third location. So now we've knotted our yarn off there, and we just have this extra strand, and we can comfortably trim that off and tuck it inside, knowing we've secured it. So you can take a moment now to tuck in our starting end and the finishing off point of your head if that's dangling out as well. So before we finish sewing this piece on, I'm going to take out my last two pins, and you'll note that we have access to the head through under the chin here, and we're going to tuck a little bit of stuffing up into each of the ears. So I'm going to do that just by grabbing a little bit, rolling it into a little ball, poking it in there. Second. So we don't want any stuffing between the top of the headpiece and the body nugget. We just want a little bit of stuffing in each of the ears. So in addition to that, we want one final little ball of stuffing. So just like that. And you're going to tuck it into the nose. You can lightly stuff the face if you find that there's a little bit of an air pocket back there, but try to keep the top of the head flat. So now we're going to take some white and just sew the bottom of his face shut. And we're going to do that using the exact same method we used for sewing down the rest of the head. So then to secure your white, you tuck it away down inside along the belly and not the back. If you're securing white yarn, make sure you're on a white part. Black yarn, make sure you're on a black part. That should be pretty logical and straightforward, I would think. There you go. So now we have his head attached to the body, and there shouldn't be much of a seam that you can really see. You can see it if I point to it, I think, but like otherwise I think it's a relatively nice join. So there we are. So now we have kind of just the rest of the pieces to pin on and so on and so forth. And there are so many poses that you can do with these limbs. I've had so much fun posing this little guy with his hands up in the air and like laying on his belly, just sort of lemurring along, you know what I mean? But today I am going to show you how to do the seated pose from the thumbnail. Just wanted to let you know that you have options and you can kind of feel free to express yourself through the art of interpretive dance. So we're going to pin all of the legs in place. Then I'll show you how to sew an open end to a closed piece and a closed piece to a closed piece, because those are they're the same technique, but it looks a little bit differently depending on what you're working with. These white edges, rough as they are going to help you position your legs. So if you pick up one of your haunches, you'll note that you've got a pointy end at where we started and a more rounded end where we finished. It's a matter of personal preference which way up you think these should go. I specifically designed it for the starting off point to be the knee, so that the stitch lines run similar to how the body lines run. But if that point is bothering you, you can hide it by turning it into sort of the join where it meets the foot as well. And what we're going to do is line the curve at the front of this haunch piece up with the curve of the white stitches. See that? So just right along that edge. And I'm just going to pin it loosely in place for now, because all of these pieces will probably move around a little bit. So that's one side, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Again, finding the pointy end that I think of as the knee, and lining it up along that edge of the white. So that is our starting position. I apparently have sewn my head on slightly crookedly, but I am cool with that because I think it adds personality. You might say he's a lemur, but now he's not the only one. Oh, man, someone needs to take the lemurs away from me for their own protection. All right, next up we're gonna grab our arms. So we have 4 fingers on our arms, and then they're kind of attached to a tube. So I want you to squish the tube flat so that the front edge lines up with, it might not be directly between the 4 fingers, but it should be kind of in that general direction. And we of course stuffed this up to what I consider the elbow, which is the base of those rows of 10 that we did at the top. Now this too is going to line up with the edge of the white. I'm just going to sort of tuck that down between the body and the knee. Insert just 1 pin for pivoting purposes, and then kind of work out the perfect angle for yours. Then lock in place with a couple more pins, like so. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So squish the top of it flat, slide it between the knee and the body, 1 pin for pivoting, and then just sort of pivot it down. Now, don't get too caught up on the direction your hands are facing. You'll note that one of mine faces slightly inwards. As long as they're vaguely front facing, you can get away with it because of the wrist joints. So that's where those limbs will go. And then for each of the feet, again, remembering that the magic ring is the sole of the foot, I would just pin that to the front of the haunch. So the reason we're pinning all these pieces in place now, even though we will have to take some of them off to sew, is so that we can check to make sure our lemur balances and make sure that our legs are all in the right spot. So it does mean we'll be pinning things twice, but you can leave yourself pin markers so you'll find the exact positions again. Don't you two look like mischief going somewhere to happen? So before we sew anything on, we are just going to pin the tail on because this is quite a large, heavy piece. I'm going to level with you here. This lemur gets pulled backwards by his tail because I did not check it properly. So I forever need to adjust his tail forward to keep him balanced. And I'm trying to avoid that with this second one. So we have a round end at our starting point and kind of a pointy end at our end point. And it's that pointy end that we're going to sort of give a little pinch to. To flatten it out. And then we're just going to find where we finished off on the body, and we're just going to cover it up with the flat side of the tail bit that we just pinched. So I'm going to grab a whole bunch of pins to secure the base of this tail. See how it pulls in backwards? So I have 2 options here. I can leave the tail where it is and adjust the legs to make that look normal, which is probably the one that I'm going to do. Or I can choose to like sew the tail to the back of his head, which will move the weight forward. Now I don't want to do that one. I'd rather adjust where his legs are sitting. So I don't know if you can see that, but he's basically been pulled backwards, so his little feet are off the ground. So I'm going to adjust them all down so that they'll all be touching the ground when sewn on. So just like that, I adjusted the arms forward slightly, I've adjusted the legs back a little bit, but the real trick to making him look lemur-y seems to be having his knees sticking out from his body like a frog, a little monkey frog. And he does now sit, though I may forever be doomed to be tweaking his tail to help him balance. That's just one of the trade-offs of this particular pattern. So now we know exactly where these arms need to be positioned. The easiest way to sew them on is actually to take the other pieces off so that we have access to this top shoulder joint. So when I was talking about leaving pin markers to help you find where you've positioned everything, what I mean is this. So I'm holding this leg in position, I'm taking out the pin that's holding it in place, and I'm inserting it just through the body where it would line up. So this is no longer pinned, but that's leaving a little marker as to where it hits on the body. I'm going to grab an extra pin here, just because I don't have one, to indicate where the top of the leg was hitting. Use this pin to mark where the bottom of it went, and this one here will mark where it sits on the belly. So now when I lift this piece out, the foot can stay attached, I've got these 4 markers showing me exactly where I lifted that leg from. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Because after I've put all that effort into working out exactly where something goes, I also don't like taking it off because I always worry that I'll never get it back right again. But you know what? I always get it back close enough. The tail can stay pinned on where it is. It's not really in the way. I'm going to use some of my grey for this, which is our body colour. The process for stitching an open end onto a closed shape is relatively similar to stitching a flat piece onto a closed shape. So we're once again going to insert our needle through the body and out through an opening close to one side of your arm. Pull it all the way through, making sure not to like warp the shape of your lemur. And you're going to insert your needle up through both layers under that first row of stitches. So like so. Then back into the body through the same opening and then up through the next gap. You should be able to do this process with a blunt darning needle. That's what I mean when I say we're not stabbing it through the stitches, we're going through the gaps. So a darning needle should be able to accomplish this. I just picked up a curved needle one day and I've never been able to go back. Make sure that you are sealing the opening at the top of that piece as you go. Now that white pin is a guide pin, so I'm going to leave that one in, but the rest of these can all come out. So as I turn the piece, I don't really want to put a lot of stitches down this side of the arm because I feel like it'll ruin the look of the piece. So what I'm going to do instead is poke my needle through the gap back into the body and pull it out maybe halfway down, so where I've got that blue pin. And I'm just going to put a small stitch through the inside of the leg to help hold it in place. And then out, and I can do another one at the bottom as well. I love working on things that are basically just pin cushions. And we're going to lock this little ankle in place against the side as well. So that provides a little bit of extra security for the limb while not giving it a fused appearance. They still look like separate limbs. So there is our first arm attached, and I can see there where I've missed a stitch along the top of that shoulder. That's how careful you have to be not to do that. So I'm going to actually go back and fix that because otherwise it'll bother me forever. There we go. Got it. Take the pins out. Trim it off and tuck any ends in. So there's his first arm, and you're going to do the exact same thing on the second arm. So guys, I need to level with you. We finished sewing the arms on. No worries there. But then I filmed the most beautiful tutorial for you all showing you how to sew a closed object to a closed object. And of course I didn't hit record again. So that's okay because the legs also kind of count as a closed object. And we're going to do those next. So I'm just going to start by pinning those back in place. Just like so. So they are back where we indicated those pins should go before. And we're going to sew on with some grey. So one of the things that I mentioned for the tail that isn't really relevant for the leg is when you're sewing two pieces that are different colours together, you can use either colour to sew them together. I don't personally think it makes that much of a difference. As we mentioned with the arms, the technique for sewing a closed piece to a closed piece is basically the same, it just looks a little bit different in execution. So once again, we're just going to get our yarn ready to go by threading it through a gap close to where our leg meets the body. And we've had a lot of practice now with working through the gaps of the body because that's what we were doing for both the head and the arm. So when you sew two closed pieces together, you're working through the gaps in the stitches for both pieces. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm inserting my needle through the gap, just one stitch wide of the leg where it meets the body. And then back into the body, one stitch wide. So the real trick to this is working one stitch wide at all times, inserting and exiting through the gaps that are closest to where the two pieces meet. So that goes for the leg and the body. And just working your whole way around as carefully as possible to just really fuse those two pieces together. Now, the problem with unscripted content like this is that I feel like I really nailed the explanation the first time, and I don't know if I'm nailing it this time, so let me know in the comments if this doesn't make any sense. So I'm just going to work my way around this whole leg, one stitch width at a time, working only in the gaps of both pieces. Now, when you reach tricky to get to places, like where this leg sticks out from the body and we need to try and get in there, you can cheat a little bit as long as you've been very careful around the other half of it. And that is just insert your needle through one of the gaps in the stitches on this side, and then thread it out through one of the gaps a little ways over. So you can skip all of those really tricky to get to stitches, as long as the rest of it is fastened down as tightly and well as possible. Now, after sewing on, all of your pieces should pass what I call the tug test. Now, that is not rocket science. That's literally you grab the piece and you give it a pull. And if the piece moves, it has failed the tug test. So see this here? It's moving. It has not been sewn on adequately to pass the tug test. So I'm going to keep stitching it down a little bit better than that. And there we go. So now we're just going to use that exact same technique to sew on the other leg and to sew on both of our feet. This guy was such a challenge for me. I had to frog and redesign him over and over and over again, to the point where I am filming this on Wednesday and this video is going live tomorrow. So that should give you some idea as to kind of what the process looks like sometimes when the creative juices just aren't flowing correctly. It'll also provide some explanation if this video happens to be a day late. And there is your finished lemur. Anyway, that's all for today. I hope you have fun making him with me. Now, next week we're going to have the result of the second chance draw, which at the moment looks like it's going to be a rat. So I hope to see you then. Okay, bye.